Trials type of deck that actually I've kind of been gravitating toward recently as well, and I've been playing. Played the regional PTQs last week with just straight Obzon control, and this is a matchup it can be decent. I actually think the Fleecemane or the Deathmist Raptor will give him some extra leeway in this matchup.
Part of the problem with trying to block against heroic strategies is eventually the creatures get so large that blocking is no longer an option. So having a Death Touch creature is really valuable because it still forces Joe to have God's Willing type effects to be able to punch through. And in the main deck, I don't think Joe is playing with any copies of things like Aqueous Form. So getting through Deathmist Raptor over and over again is going to be a struggle.
All right, underway. Joe has won the die roll, so he'll be on the play. Starts off with just a fetch land. So we go over to Osborne. He'll start with Sandstep Citadel. And yeah, so the pressure will be on Joe to make a play early on. If you look at the removal, there's a fair amount on Osborne's side. What he does get, Joe can capitalize on, is that nearly all of Matt's removal costs 3 mana. Maybe a late game Murderous Cut can cost 1. His one of Bioblader Ultimate price can cost 2. But cards like God's Willing are going to be very effective here.
Definitely. That's part of the reason that Heroic exists as a deck, is because if you're trying to beat it with Obzone Charms and Hero's Downfalls, that matches up very poorly against cards like God's Willing and Stubborn Denial. And that's where Heroic decks get a lot of their edge, is being very efficient against removal spells. We saw that early on in the tournament where Banned Heroic Pilot was able to blunt cards like Jeskai Charm and Lightning Strike pretty easily by either growing things to be too large or by having efficient prevention effects.
Temple from Osborne. Not too surprising. These Obzon decks generally are just going to start off the game by developing their mana. For Joe, that he has to start off with Temples is a little more of a concern.
Well, it depends. It could mean that he has not a lot going on. It also could mean that because Matt's not putting any pressure on him, he's not attacking his hand with anything, he's got no threats in play, Joe can play a very conservative path here, try to only deploy threats when he's ready to protect them or when he doesn't care about them being removed.
All right, third land for Matt. That's going to be a basic. Going to go for Deathmist Raptor here. Yeah, this is interesting. So this is one of the new dimensions that this Obzon deck can attack from. And I think the Death Touch is going to serve him really well.
Yep. Joe, with one of his 2 main deck copies here of Monastery Mentor, and I alluded to this earlier in the broadcast, we had Ross Merriam on camera a lot in Cleveland last weekend, and this card was awesome against Obzon decks that are trying to gum up the works. Even cards like Elspeth, Whisperwood Elemental, Mastery of the Unseen, they were not able to beat an unchecked Monastery Mentor because the creatures got so large, and this deck is capable of generating them so fast that trying to pump out a sea of blockers is not an easy way to disrupt this card. You basically have to kill it, and that plays right into Joe's game plan of using God's Willing and similar effects to prevent Hero's Downfall and such from making much of a difference.
You're definitely right, and Matt's not main decking cards like End Hostilities, so if Joe starts to go wide, Matt can Bioblade away the tokens perhaps, but it actually is very hard for him to deal with them. And you see him adapting an aggressive plan here. Instead he's going to play Deathmist Raptor and just attack, cast a second one.
And if you look right now at Matt's deck list here that I have in front of me, there's no copies of things like Whisperwood Elemental. There's no Mastery Unseen in this main deck. So he's going to have a really difficult time keeping up with this card if he's unable to get it off the table fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're alluding to the cards like Mastery and Whisperwood. So there's a couple, there's so many different builds of Obzon right now, and they're all fairly similar. So he's going halfway into the Morph package. There's the deck that Sam Black posted about a week ago on Star City Games Premium, where he talked about Whisperwoods, Fleecemanes, Den Protectors, Masteries, this definitely called it Obzon Megamorph. And this one's not necessarily doing that. It's just mid-range, but it's playing this Den Protector Deathmist package.
Yeah, it's not all in on trying to play the Morph strategy here, but certainly Den Protector and Den Protector and Deathmist Raptor interacting that way, super good in certain spots.
Yeah, to make room for this, they're doing stuff like cutting down taking like a control deck and cutting out some of the extra Elspeths, maybe not playing any Read the Bones, cutting a Thoughtseize, cutting a Downfall. Yeah, being a little more proactive.
I'm not seeing a decisive list in terms of, all right, I'm cutting this card from my deck entirely to make room for Den Protector and Deathmist Raptor. Mostly what's happening is that people cut a Downfall, a Thoughtseize, and so forth. And there is more rationale for doing that once Den Protector's in the deck because you have more looks at your various spells. You have an Eternal Witness style effect, so you still get to play with what feels like 4 copies of a lot of these cards, even if you shave some of them out.
So Matt didn't play a 4th land. He passed the turn. So on end step, Joe cycled the Defiant Strike off his Monastery, off one of his creatures, off his Gauntlet Trailblazer to give it a counter, and to make a Monk token for Monastery Mentor. And you see Joe is taking a really slow approach to this game plan, as you mentioned. protecting all his creatures, not necessarily playing them on curve, getting card advantage out of them. You see Defiant Strike there. Pretty nice. It made a 1/1 prowess and put a counter on Trailblazer while drawing a card. That's real good.
Especially important for Joe to take this kind of game plan and keep it slow when he's got Monastery Mentor, because he can catch all up. As long as he keeps this threat protected, it's going to be hard for Matt to do much of anything to stop the inevitable, especially if Matt is missing land drops like he is thus far.
Yeah, you may see Matt take the aggressive role in the game plan, which is what he's done with these Death Mists. He's hit for 3. Joe has actually fetched 3 times. You see Joe down to 14. And now Joe's going to try to take the aggression line back. He swings Mentor, Monk Token, and Trailblazer. He's swinging into Death Mist Raptor, which certainly suggests that something's up here.
Yeah, I think this is one of those spots where it's a really bad sign for Matt that Joe's attacking like this, but Matt has to block. He's got to make some sort of effort to get some inroads here on Joe's board or make him use his mana.
And what a play. This is Ajani's Presence strived once. So he's going to pump and prowess the Mentor. It'll survive. Makes a second Monk. He pumps and heroics the Trailblazer. So it's 3 damage from the Trailblazer, 2 damage from the Monk token, and he takes down the Death Mist Raptor.
And God's Willing is still in Joe's hand.
Yeah, Joe, patience here. And I like how Joe has adapted his game plan to the matchup here. Rather than running out all his threats, he's max valuing his cards instead.
And Joe's even floating out a little bit. I think he's only got 2 lands left in hand on top of the God's Willing. And you see him, he's already made 5 land drops, but he's just squeezing so much out of this Monastery Mentor right now especially with Matt stumbling here with his land drops, Joe may be able to win the game basically on Monastery Mentor alone.
And if you look at, there was no good block there for Matt. No matter what he blocked, the Ajani's Presence was going to kill the Death Mist. As it turns out, he blocked the correct creature. He saved himself the most life points. It's just, he's not in a good spot.
And Joe here drawing a creature this turn. I think at this point he's happy with any spell because of the implications with Monastery Mentor and the various prowess monks in play. But Joe still feels like he's in a pretty commanding spot here. He can keep on alpha striking away, and it's hard for Matt to block much of anything.
Swinging again, Death Mist will jump in front of Monastery Mentor. What Matt is doing that I like here is he's setting up a turn where he can unmorph what I presume is a Den Protector and then get all his Death Mists back.
Yeah, he's doing what he can here. And I think that turn is probably going to come to fruition next turn. Now with the 2 Death Mists in the graveyard and Matt with an opportunity to unmorph Den Protector.
So God's Willing on Monastery Mentor makes a 3rd Monk token, pumps both the Prowess Monks. That's going to be 6 damage. Matt will go to 9. Matt's going to lose his Death Mist Raptor.
And I think Joe is aware of what's going to be happening next turn too. He knows that the Death Mist Raptors are going to be back. But
it may not matter.
I think Joe's plan here is I'm going to play this favorite Hoplite post-combat, and if I draw any spell, just anything that triggers prowess, that should be enough to get the last couple points of damage across the finish line.
Yeah. Doesn't play another land out of his hand just yet. Joe did have one, but declined to cast it.
So Thoughtseize is a very interesting draw here from Matt, because he still has the mana left over to unmorph the Den Protector. And if Joe's hand has any spell in it, Matt's kind of got to get it out of the hand.
Oh, yeah.
It's just way too bad if Joe gets it next turn. But we know that Joe's hand is just lands, and if he casts the Thoughtseize, it's actually very good for Joe, because Joe's trying to get the last couple points across the finish line.
It's 2 damage.
So Matt's in this very interesting spot of, does he cast this Thoughtseize or not?
Opts not to. He'll just pass the turn. And now, I believe it's just the two morphs in Matt's deck. It's just Death Mist and Den Protector. Draw for the turn was great for Joey. It was Ajani's Presence. And actually, that's a situation where if Joe's getting punished a bit for not playing his land last turn, this turn he could play land 7 and double strive the Presence. But it's a light punishment, if any.
Well, I'm surprised by leaving the lands back in hand anyway, just because Matt's not in a position to play around much of anything. He's dead to most of Joe's good plays. Joe also has Treasure Cruise in the deck, so you would think you just want to have the lands in play, so if you drew Treasure Cruise, you'd have the most opportunities to do as much as you'd like. That said, I think Ajani's Presence might be so powerful of a draw this turn that Matt's not going to be able to overcome this.
It's Den Protector. Not going to get anything back. He can stack the triggers, I believe, such that both the Death Mists come out of the graveyard first.
Yeah.
So he gets 3 blockers.
And if you look at just the smallest stuff in play, I suppose it's possible Matt may be able to save off lethal this turn, but if he does, his whole board's collapsing.
Yeah, he's going to have to throw blocks in front of everything. But yeah, you're right. this presence is just going to wipe Matt's board again. We'll see Raptor in front of Trailblazer. See if he tries to play around a non-creature spell. In Matt's situation, you may just want to make blocks, assuming your opponent doesn't have one. But the problem is that if Joe didn't have one, Joe's not attacking here.
Exactly. That's the squeeze there. Joe does not necessarily have to tender a big attack that last turn if he's got nothing going on, because Matt's play this turn is pretty much set in stone. He's going to unmorph that Den Protector. He's going to get back his Death Disruptors. If Joe doesn't feel like he can beat that, he can just say go and wait for a better spot.
And here are the blocks here. See what Joe... Yeah, decision. If Joe had the 7th land down, the presence would be lethal here. It's still backbreaking. And, you know, he can force all of these to trade up.
Yeah, Joe kind of has it covered both ways. In the event that he doesn't have lethal through Ajani's presence, he can make just huge inroads on Matt's board, and that's going to be close to good enough.
Presence with 1 Strive on it. Imagine he's going to go for Mentor and Lagana Band Trailblazer.
That said, if Joe had land number 7 in play, this would be a kill this turn. He would be able just to pump through on all the unblocked monks, and that would be exactly 9.
Yeah, because I think if Matt had End Hostilities mana represented, maybe Joe would have to respect that. But there's not a line that there's not a set of draws I don't believe that Joe has to respect here.
Yeah. Should be in the clear.
Yeah, he's going to actually presence looks like the favored Hoplite and the Monastery Mentor to save both of them. He'll deal 6 to Matt, all those monks prowessing. Leaves Matt with 1 Raptor and 3 life points against 6 attackers. Can't think of a card that will get him out of it. And Temple of Malady certainly isn't it.
Yeah, it would have to be something like a main deck Drown in Sorrow, and that's not something Matt's got going on.
We'll scry, just to be sure. Yeah, that's... Yeah, I mean, if he has Bioblade in hand, then we can keep playing.
Yeah.
If he has Bioblade in hand, though, I'm a little surprised it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, it felt like that probably would have been the play last turn in lieu of the Den Protector shenanigans.
Right. Then again, we are still playing. So, yeah, it looks like he does. All right, Bioblade will take care of the monk tokens. There's still a game here.
And this is now the punishment for Joe not playing land number 7. He failed to have to kill last turn, and now, I mean, if he doesn't do it this turn, Matt's hand is nothing but spells. Yeah, if Matt starts Siege Rhino and you see Joe's going to play Seeker, if Matt starts, Matt can start dropping Siege Rhinos and very much be in this game. Yeah, I was anticipating that if Matt had the Bioblade, we would have seen some different sequencing over the last couple turns, but now it's looking like we got a game again, and Matt just drew land number 5. All right, Temple will scry. Yeah, I mean, and I'm assuming he does have Rhinos. He's had he's had so many cards for so long. And that's got to be the play. Get himself off the ropes here of having 3 life points. Yeah, here's Siege Rhino number 1, 6 and 11. Matt's catching up. There's an argument that Matt might have wanted to just downfall the Monastery Mentor to cut the legs out from under Joe of chaining together some cantrips here with that Monastery Mentor. But I agree with you. Just 1 spell kills him then, though. Yeah, exactly. I agree. He's better served here just getting the Siege Rhino in play. He can start getting on the offensive a little bit. And Joe drew a land that turn, and it has turned around for Matt, Osborne, Koch. I mean, he can start being very aggressive with his attacks now. Downfall in hand, another Siege Rhino, so it's really hard for combat to go poorly for him. We'll see. He's going to go for Courser, hope to hit that extra land and maybe get Courser and Downfall. Finds Elspeth, not going to get that. Don't know if he has a 2-mana card in his hand. He has Thoughtseize. He has Dromoka's Command still up. Yeah. Wow. That's huge. Yeah, I'll go ahead and go for that. Fight away the Monastery Mentor. That will certainly cut Joe's outs down. Matt can start going on the offensive here in a big way, too. He does not have to wait. And Dromoka's Command. That'll cause Siege Rhino is going to go ahead and fight away the Monastery Mentor.
see if anybody got a 1/1 counter. Yeah, the Rhino did. Has 2 damage on it right now. Not going to attack just yet, and I like that patience out of Matt if he has more Rhinos in his hand. He doesn't need to attack until he's got a dominant board position.
Well, he is risking something like Aqueous Form, maybe stealing something here. Joe drawing Treasure Cruise and training together some really powerful sequences. So it's not a total freebie for Matt to wait as long as possible. The Siege Rhinos in hand are not a guarantee of anything.
Yeah, Aqueous Form is a thing. We're going to see right now Ordeal of Thassa. Matt does have a Downfall in hand.
I mean,
but that certainly can be blanked by a lot of cards in Bant.
If Joe finds a God's Willing and a Defiant Strike, for example, off of this Ordeal, he wins the game. He can punch through with God's Willing on green.
So that would, the Ordeal puts the Hoplite up to 3 power. It'll swing into a 4 power. You're right, it would need to be Defiant Strike and God's Willing, but this is possible. And the question, if you're Joe, do you swing for the fences here and hope that this works out? Yeah, he's going to do it.
The attack's a freebie. It's not getting any better, and Matt still has a bunch of cards in hand.
Does Joe draw what it takes to win? Looks like he hit a land, but and a spell.
I think God's Willing may have been among the cards he found there. If that is the case, he is a point short.
It's a 4/5 at the moment. Is Matt going to block? He can't just bounce it off Siege Rhino.
Yeah, keep in mind that this Hoplite is not taking damage inside of combat because of the Heroic trigger.
Right. Looks like that's what Matt's going to do. Does Joe want to make a play to try to kill the Rhino? Yeah, his card was God's Willing, right? He'll just play the land and pass.
Joe almost stole this game. I mean, Matt may have slightly overestimated how stable his spot was there.
The next Rhino out of Matt's hand, if he has one, will seal it. If he can gain more life. But right now, Joe can upkeep God's Willing and hope to hit any more targeting spell. And, I mean, Matt has Downfall. There's a lot of things that could go wrong.
Joe is not at 0% right now. I think that's pretty important to keep in mind here.
I like the play by Matt. It's going to start with Thoughtseize. Joe just cracked an Ordeal of Thassa. This seems like a great time to Thoughtseize. And Joe will... Question is, Joe's going to... He's going to God's Willing in response, I assume.
When Joe's got cards like Ordeal of Thassa and Treasure Cruise in his deck, you can never be too sure that you've got the game locked out because there are sequences of running draws. You might be playing against 4 or 5 cards next turn, so it's important for Matt not to get into this perspective of, well, all I have to do is beat a top deck X, because the top deck X could be several cards. And Joe came very close to stealing the game last turn.
God's Willing on favorite Hoplite. See if that's going to work. It's going to scry a fetch line to the bottom. Thoughtseize can resolve. It shows Mana Confluence. Matt's down to 4.
And if this is the case, I think Matt can probably just downfall here and attack.
Well, it depends what color protection the Hoplite has. I imagine it has protection from black at this point.
Well, I'm saying that Matt can simply use the downfall to get rid of the Seeker, and he's got lethal coming across.
Oh,
or with Siege Rhino in hand. I mean, he's got a couple different paths here.
Yeah. Which could confirm he has Downfall. I believe he does, though. He's just going to swing the Rhino. There's a lot of lines. He can upkeep Downfall the Hoplite. Yeah, the Hoplite is protection from black.
With the coast clear here, I think Matt's got it a couple different ways.
So here comes Siege Rhino over for 5. He has another Siege Rhino. Yeah, he'll just play another Rhino.
But again, Joe is still drawing live here. He's still got Treasure Cruise and so forth in his deck. This is not a done deal.
Yeah, I think I wanted to see... I mean, yeah, you're right. Downfalling and swinging just wins. So that's probably a better line.
I don't think Joe drew it, so I think he's done. But Matt gave Joe a little bit of rope there. Joe not quite able to capitalize, and Matt now up a game.
But well played there. I mean, from Matt's side, was able to weather until he hit his lands, and from Joe's side, you know, a slight misstep there on the land.
Yeah, no, if Joe has 7 mana available, the turn that he casts Ajani's Presence, it's lethal.
Yeah,
Instead,
he presences all 3 of the unblocked monks, and then they're all, that's 9.
He still had a pretty good turn, or what seemed like a pretty good turn there of colding Matt's board, and Joe still had a dominant position, but Matt with his 1 made deck copy of Bile Blight was able to stabilize from there. Joe missed a couple draw steps, and Matt got turned around.
Yeah, that's a pretty good steal there for getting game 1 off Banned Heroic if you're the Obzon mid-range player.
Oh, yeah, no, that's got to feel good if you're Matt, because typically game 1 is not going to be in your favor. You're trying to shore it up in the sideboard, but Matt now going with a pretty big advantage in the post-board games.
Yeah, so with the Morph package, what's our sideboard then for the Banned Heroic matchup?
A Dromoka's Command, a Garruk Apex Predator, an Ajani Mentor of Heroes, a Hero's Downfall, an Erebos, God of the Dead, an Ugin, an End Hostilities, a Crux of Fate, a Thoughtseize, 2 Read the Bones, 2 Duress, 2 Drown Sorrows. So the cards I definitely like in this matchup are the 2 copies of Duress. I do like Thoughtseize as well, even though you saw Matt get jammed up with it towards the end there. Breaking up Joe's polarized hands is just so powerful. I think it's worth the risk. Crux of Fate and End Hostilities seem like no-brainers to me, as does Hero's Downfall and Dromoka's Command. It is possible, no guarantee, but it's possible that Matt wants to go to Ugin here. You don't really want expensive spells as a rule against heroic strategies, but Ugin is pretty close to a lock. So if you're going to pay a lot of mana for something, it might as well be something that wins the game when it resolves.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that he can cut out. Cards like Elspeth really doesn't serve him very well in the matchup. He can win the game with cards like Death Mist and Siege Rhino. He doesn't have to go big.
Elspeth minusing can come up in certain spots there, but it's no guarantee of anything with cards like Ajani's Presence in the deck. And it's also just an inferior version of cards like Crux of Fate and End Hostilities that he can bring in. So I agree with you. There's some slow, cumbersome cards you can get out of the deck here and bring in some more removal and some more sweepers.
Now, on Joe's side, his sideboard slightly different than the one that Ross Merriam used, but not by too much. Treasure Cruise, Disdainful Stroke, Stubborn Denial, Ordeal of Heliod, Aqueous Form, Encase and Ice.
So I think you're definitely going to see the additional Treasure Cruises come in. I think they're for any removal-oriented matchup. This one definitely qualifies. The 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, very good against just the big stuff. 3 Stubborn Denials, good against Hero's Downfall and so forth. I think there's a chance that Aqueous Form comes in because Matt's trying to block, although he also has a lot of removal, so it's a little sketchy. And Encase and Ice is a reasonable answer to Death Mist Raptor.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit worse when your opponent has access to Dromoka's Command because you just don't want stray enchantments hanging around on the table. That said, you saw Deathless Raptor and especially, and Den Protector to a lesser extent, were kind of problematic blockers at certain spots, and Joe may just want to get them off the table. Siege Rhino as well.
It is interesting, though, I do want to say Disdainful Stroke. Against the Obzon Morph package, the number of targets for Disdainful Stroke is actually getting very small in the deck.
Yes, it's true.
Siege Rhino and Murderous Cut, and that's about it.
Well, you can also anticipate the sweepers coming in as well, which are pretty hard to beat. It's possible that Joe's got Stubborn Denials. He feels like that checks most of the big spells he'd be worried about, and maybe Disdainful Stroke doesn't come in. But I have not seen heroic players make that call, even against the Morph version of Obzon. I think people just default to bring in the Disdainful Strokes because Siege Rhino is a powerful play, and you can anticipate them bringing in some 5-mana sweepers. They may have Elspeth still in the deck. It's hard to pull the trigger on just cutting that card. And at that point, you also have no outs to Ugin. If it shows up, that's just the end of the game.
All right, now if you were wondering about the pins we're wearing on our jackets, notice have B pins. That's because they are the current pin for Star City Game Night, which goes on every month. As we have a new month, this means we have a new exclusive token and pin. This is going to be the B for the month of May. And remember, these Star City Game Nights, they are at your local stores, and they are given away in both tokens, foils, and pins. That's the one for this month. Now, next month we have coming up, that one I'm particularly fond of. This is going to be the bunny pin that we have coming up for.
We saw the full playmat of this recently. It's very militaristic, very strategy planning, these bunnies trying to get the carriers. This is a June kit. If you want to get signed up for June, I suggest heading over to starcitygames.com/game night. Touch your store OP organizer, whatever the case may be. Stores have discretion to run this event as a sanctioned or unsanctioned tournament, whatever format they want, just to get players in the store for some fun and friendly magic. That May kit that you saw, obviously too late to get signed up for that kit. We're in May, but if you want to get signed up for June, get this money kit, head over to starcitygames.com/game night. Contact your Star City Games organized play representative.
Yeah, 8 foils and 2 pins given away each week at your local game store. Learn more about hashtag SCG Game Night. Yeah, creature type rabbit on it. I think the bunny, they're adorable. I'm definitely going to get one, but I'm trying to think of what makes rabbits.
I stole the kitten pin from last month.
Okay.
It's tough because we get the pins to wear on our lapels every single month, and they're very diligent about, the producers are very diligent about getting them back from us, but I was able to successfully steal the kitten pin, which was very important.
The bee pin, the last thing I remember that made instant tokens, reminds me of the hive. I guess there's Hornet Queen. That's probably more normal.
Hornet Nest?
Yeah, that too.
I do like the hive reference, though.
Does it make green insects, or are they robots?
I believe they're artifacts. It's 5 mana, you tap it in 5, and you get a 1/1 flyer.
Yeah.
They didn't make them like Mastery of the Unseen back in the day. You know, it wasn't quite the same deal.
You had to pay.
You had to pay
for that. All right, underway for game 2. Joe Lossett's on the play again. Start off on a fetch land, no turn 1 play, but his first creature will be one of his 2-drops as he cracks both fetches.
You can't even use it with Mishra's Workshop, which is the only artifact enabler back in the day. You can use it to cast the hive,
but then you got to pay.
But then you got to pay full retail down the line.
Well, you could Soul Ring into it.
You could Soul Ring.
That'd be good. It's a lot of colorless mana.
It's a lot of good things to Soul Ring into, though.
Blaze.
I forgot they brought this bad boy back for 10th edition.
Yeah, it did not see much play.
And those aren't bees; they are wasps.
They're wasps. Okay, so you can't use the bee token for it. Bees and wasps are not the same kind of creature. All right, Blight takes care of Hero of Erois. And Joe does not have a 3rd land. Just passes back.
Missing blue mana as well, which happens with this deck. The mana base is hubbed around a lot of fetch lands. You have to have white mana. Possible that Joe, with Dromoka's command already in hand, wanted to go ahead and get that going.
There's Courser. Yeah, Matt went for Obzon Charm, but actually does not have white mana for it. Joe deciding if he wants to edict away this Courser. He probably does. Yeah, Dromoka's command. Now you actually can choose 2 modes. You can choose Sacrifice Enchantment and put a counter on target creature.
Or prevent, yeah, I mean, you don't have to do anything fancy there, yeah. You can just...
Well, no, yeah, there was a question when I first read the card, I wasn't sure you could just kill an enchantment with it, but you can.
Yes.
If it's a creature. If it's a non-creature enchantment, you actually can't. There's not a second mode you can pick on an empty board. The draw from Matt we know is Thoughtseize. He'll go ahead and fire that off, see what Joe's on. And now we get to learn Joe's hand. Paramount of Action, we see 2 more Dromoka's commands. So no Courser's going to be safe here. We have a God's Willing, a Defiant Strike, and an Encase in Ice.
It really wouldn't surprise me if the card that Matt took here was the Defiant Strike, because Joe's hand is so bad and has no ability to protect a creature even if it shows up down the pipeline, because there's only 1 white source of mana here. Taking God's Willing here is fine, but Joe's hand is in really rough shape. I mean, no blue mana, no creature, and no ability to protect a creature if it shows up.
Yeah. There's Hero of Erois. Joe does draw a creature for the turn. By taking God's Willing, Matt does get free reign on his kill spells here. The remaining cards in Joe's hand are his Defiant Strike, 2 Dromoka's commands, and an Encase in Ice. I guess if Matt's not planning on playing his own creature anytime soon, he can just strand the Defiant Strike for a while as he makes land drops.
Yeah. And God's Willing just might be the most powerful card in Joe's hand in an abstract sense.
Yeah, plays a fetch land, or rather a temple, passes. Joe draws planes for the turn. So Matt's still working with near perfect information. Hero's going to swing. No effects, down to 15. Plays a planes. Yeah, and Joe's in the spot here where he'd want to cycle away the Defiant Strike, but he really can't do that in the face of this mana.
No. He's got to wait. Maybe he cycles it. If Matt plays a Siege Rhino or some such, he can cycle it on that. That's a lot safer.
Yeah, he needs to do it off of Matt's creatures.
Or just wait until Matt's tapped low enough where the coast is clear. But I agree with you. He can't just go ahead and do it right now into 5 open mana. Also, Matt had an Obzon Charm that he dropped on the table that Joe knows about. So if Matt's not casting the Obzon Charm, he's probably holding up some sort of removal spell.
6th land for Matt. He has Obzon Charm and Siege Rhino, among others, in his hand. See if he goes for anything. Could just continue to develop his mana. Play Siege Rhino with a removal spell up. What we do know is that there's an Encase in Ice waiting in Joe's hand for a potential Rhino. Matt's gonna fetch. Joe does have some action, but he's gonna struggle to get value off the 2 Dromoka's commands.
Yeah. Especially with Matt being aware of them. You know, there's some hope maybe that Matt randomly has a lot of enchantments in his hand, or, you know, plays in such a way to cooperate, but with Matt having the information, they lose a lot of potency.
And the fight, when you're this far behind on mana, the fight ability on Dromoka's command is really risky. Because often Matt will be able to leave up kill spell mana for most of the game.
Yeah, you don't want to go for that sort of play and then have Matt respond to a removal spell and that be the end of the game.
So he's gonna go for it. It's gonna be, looks like Fleece Main Lion with 4 mana up. I really like that play actually. It's very conservative. Leaves up the Obzon Charm as a kill spell.
And forces Joe to do something if he wants to attack. He's got a 3/3 against a 2/2 right now. So Joe kind of has to initiate something to be able to attack here. And then Matt can potentially respond with removal spells.
Joe can't even play the Encase in Ice yet. Draws, I believe, no, he draws Ordeal of Thassa.
Yeah, again without blue mana.
And if he doesn't cycle Defiant Strike soon, Matt can Monstrosity the Fleece Main in response to a Defiant Strike. It's an ugly chain of events if that's how it goes down.
Well, as long as Joe has Dromoka's command available, Matt can't make a move on the Monstrosity.
All right, because Hero would get bigger.
But a holding pattern here definitely favors Matt because his deck's just more powerful playing land drop to land drop.
Land number 7 from Matt. He has Rhino and Charm in hand. With 7 mana, he can play both. Which is dangerous because if Joe goes for a fight with Dromoka's command, a counter goes on the hero off of the heroic before the Dromoka's command resolves, and then before Dromoka's command resolves, Matt can exile away the creature with Obzon Charm.
Yeah. Matt has a lot of control over it. And this is, earlier I would have suggested taking the Defiant Strike over the God's Willing. This is where Matt really gets paid off for having selected God's Willing because Joe has no protection to play over the top. And Matt is aware of this from the earlier Thoughtseize.
Exactly.
But Joe just needs to do something because his cards in hand are getting stranded here, and now Matt's adding another sizable threat to the table.
Joe down to 15 off the Fleece Main Line, and now Matt, you see, leaving up Obzon Charm is going to make a Siege Rhino. And I like the way Matt's playing this, leaving up just enough mana to keep Joe on the back foot. Siege Rhino will put Joe down to 12, Matt up to 16. And imagine you're going to have to see Joe just fire off this Defiant Strike. He needs to find something. He goes and go shoot a Defiant Strike over at the Siege Rhino.
Yeah, Joe, again, he knows that he can't make a move here trying to Defiant Strike his own creature because Matt can just respond with an Obzon Charm before the Defiant Strike resolves, fizzle it. Even if Joe then responds with Dromoka's command to fight something, Joe's got nothing, and Matt still has a creature left over.
Joe hit a pair of lands there. He hit a blue-white temple and a fetch land. But the difficulty is that Joe's now behind on life points. So it's not just can he keep his threats alive, he actually has to try to be proactive. His deck's very poor at blocking.
Yeah. I mean, he does have Encase in Ice, which is a big help here. But whenever he taps his mana low, that's a potential mixture of cards that Matt can disregard, Matt still has to respect the possibility that maybe Joe's picked up a God's Willing in the sequence or what have you. But when Joe taps low, then you're really only playing around one card.
So Encase will top down the Rhino. And Joe I like this, he's acknowledging the fact that he has to get aggressive. He's going to swing with the hero. Puts Matt down to 14. He's on the losing side of the race now, and he's just going to hope that things get better. And you talked about one of the vulnerabilities of Encase in Ice, and Matt drawing a Dromoka's command.
Dromoka's command is not very powerful against the Ordeals because it's timing sensitive and because of the way the Ordeals are worded. It's when you sacrifice this, so you do actually get to draw the 2 cards. But against Encase in Ice, it is outstanding. And this actually sets up Matt for a sequence where he has the ability to both Dromoka's command and force Joe's hand to do something and have the mana left over to Monstrous, the Fleece Main Line, which is another problem for Joe.
If he just goes for the Dromoka's command here, Joe doesn't have a good play.
Yeah, if Matt just goes, I will go ahead and make you sacrifice enchantment and have Siege Rhino fight Hero Virolis, I do not believe Joe has an appropriate response.
Yeah, and there's Dromoka's command, sacking an enchantment, and he'll see Rhino fights Hero. The Dromoka command in Joe's hand doesn't solve this.
Well, I actually think that Matt might be saying the Fleece Main Line fights the Hero Virolis because if Joe responds with anything, Matt can then respond by going Monstrous with Fleece Main Line, which is maybe something he wants to do anyway. In either event, Matt's got it covered.
Dromoka's command back from Joe. Hero of Auroras will get a counter, and it will fight Fleecemane. They both want to make the fight happen. But Fleecemane's going to be indestructible when this fight happens.
Yeah, and I imagine Matt's just going to respawn here. I suppose he could still Abzan Charm if he wanted to instead, but...
Monstrosity and Fleecemane just wins here.
It's so smooth on the mana here that I would...
Okay, he'll Abzan Charm instead. That's fine. I mean, I think the Monstrosity's better, but I think they're both going to win.
Yeah, I think that Joe's now out of resources, no creatures in play even.
It takes damage off the attack. Temple from Joe. Yeah, both plays should win. And he'll do what he can. It's going to be Seeker of the Way, leaving up Dromoka's command. I think he's going to have to just immediately Dromoka's command before that monstrosity could happen.
I think so too.
All right, 1/1 counter, and they fight, so 4 life gained for Joe. So Matt losing his Lion there is not really how he wanted things to happen. Joe's at 12. It still looks bad for Joe, but there's more of a chance now.
Joe's at 12. He's got a Seeker in the way in play as well, which can generate quite a bit of lifelink potentially. So Joe will have a cushion to work with potentially.
Yeah, 8 from the Siege Rhino.
Joe is definitely in a bad spot. No two ways about it. But he's still playing at least.
If you want to talk about Fleecemane lines though, Matt's going to play his line. His last card is a land, so this time Matt's going to have no choice but to make the monstrosity play. And he'll go ahead and do it. That's problematic for Joe. You can Aqueous Form by it if he draws one.
Keep in mind, Joe's also at 8 right now, facing 8 points of power in play. So it's not just about can he avoid this Fleecemane Lion, but can he protect himself in the meantime?
Yeah, he really just needs to hit an Aqueous Form here and then go from there.
Yeah.
It's going to be Ordeal of Thassa. That's not bad.
Remember, he has a counter from the Dromoka's command the previous turn, so he's going to be able to fire off this Ordeal right now.
Yeah, doesn't get a remember, it doesn't have Heroic though, so it doesn't actually get a counter when you cast it. I know so often you assume, oh yeah, 2 counters from the Ordeal. So it'll swing as a 5/5. It'll bounce off the Fleecemane line. Joe will gain 5, go to 13. Keeps him alive for a turn.
Still sets up Joe to trigger at the next turn and gain the life necessary to get to that next turn.
Thought sees the draw from Matt. Well, he doesn't necessarily get the life gain. He has to cast a spell. But he'll get the 5/5. It won't die, so that much is good. Rhino swings across. Joe down to 9. Joe has made, this is both games where I thought one player had, this end game where I thought one player had ended it, and then there was a slight mistake on their side that really has been punishing.
Yep.
We saw that Joe last game. Battle-wise Hoplites is the play. Joe's going to swing. He'll crack the Ordeal. You know, there's a turn where Matt Abzan Charmed, where I think he could have used the Monstrosity. It would have been a lot stronger.
Exactly. And one extra Fleecemane line here that's a 4/4 indestructible gives Matt so much control over attacking and blocking in this game.
And that's a really easy spot to get into when you feel like you definitely have had a game won. Sometimes, you know, you find a good play, and what you see a lot of the really patient players do is they find a really good play, and then they look for a great play.
Yeah, I mean, Joe mulliganed, he was missing blue mana. His hand was kind of nonsense when he got Thought Seized, and I think it's very easy to be in a position where you're thinking, I kind of got it locked up, you know. Yeah. It's not a lot for Joe to do. I know his hand's not very good, but this Banned Heroic deck, once they kind of get things turned around a little bit, the number of cards you have in your deck that is relevant can go down real fast.
So Joe, off those card draw spells, it looks like he's going to use God's Willing on Seeker to deny blocks and to gain life.
And this is setting the stage for Joe potentially where something like another God's Willing and Aqueous Form may be enough for him to push through lethal next turn.
Yeah, he dealt 6 there, so Matt's down to 8. Joe gains 6. Has lifelink. Up to 15. Yeah. We have a game. Joe clawing his way back here in game 2. Last card in his hand, I believe, he has a land and a Monastery Mentor. But that's a pretty good draw. It's Abzan Charm from Matt And I like this. He's going to Thoughtseize first, try to get away any kind of God's Willing. You see Ajani's Presence and Monastery Mentor, but Presence doesn't defend from Obzon Charm.
No.
And if I'm in Matt's situation, I think you see him take the Mentor and just charm away that Seeker.
I think so too. You can still go on the offensive with your Siege Rhino here. It's obviously not risk-free. You're still vulnerable to something like Aqueous Form and so forth, but it's not a bad spot to be in.
You have this indestructible hexproof blocker. Rhino's gonna plays the land. Rhino's gonna swing. Joe will go down to 11. Now, does Matt exile away the Seeker? I think he does, but we'll see.
I think there is nothing to be gained here by allowing Joe to go into his turn, and a lot potentially be lost.
And there you go, Obzon Charm, exiling Seeker of the way. We know that the Giant's Presence is the card. That's not gonna help. Presence is great here as a trick, but the problem is this monstrosity Fleecemane line is really a jerk. Joe's draws Mana Confluence. That's not much help. And a strength of Obzon is that it does a very good job of playing creatures on the defensive and then turning around really fast and having them be an offense. You see, Matt's been on the defense, and now we look at the board and you're like, and by the way, this is a 2-turn clock.
Exactly. And that's part of the value of the Deathmist Raptor Den Protector package is it plays very nicely into that. You can play defense, like we saw Matt in game 1, and turn around and flip it into offense very quickly.
Matt has drawn something here. It's going to be a morph. Could be either Den Protector or Deathmist. Both are really strong here, actually. Yeah. I don't think it matters which one it is. I guess ideally it would be Den Protector.
Yeah, Den Protector for a removal spell here is going to be very hard for Joe to beat.
Yeah, just Siege Rhino swinging. Joe's going to have to take. He'll go down to 7. And unless Joe draws some business, it is very likely that Matt has him dead next turn.
Even if he draws business, it's going to be hard because any business spell here is going to make his Battlewise Hoplite eligible to be hit with Obzon Charm.
Right.
And then, assuming that morph is Den Protector, Matt gets it back at instant speed, and the Ajani's Presence offers no defense.
Yeah, if it's Den Protector, and it is, I'm going to say, if it's Death Mist, maybe Joe has another turn, but with Den Protector, that seems really unlikely. He's going to go ahead, getting back a card. Great options.
To me, Obzon Charm seems like the most potent thing against the card that you know about.
Well, he has Bile-Blight in his graveyard, actually. So if you know the card's Ajani's Presence, which he does, Bile-Blight's pretty good here, too.
Well, Bile-Blight allows, if you try to Bile-Blight the Hoplite, for example, +1/+1, and then the Heroic trigger gets it to be a 1/1. So
yeah.
I think...
Actually, on both of them, you're right. You'd have Obzon Charm gives you more flexibility. Gets back a Courser, I believe?
Yeah.
That's also a really reasonable way to go about it. Just saying, okay, I'll just keep card advantaging and life gaining you instead.
Well, the thing is, I feel like this game is going to be played on a very short timeline, one way or the other. Either Joe draws nothing and the Siege Rhinos just kind of kill him, or Joe draws some way to make blocking not an option for Matt, and Matt gets kind of punked out of the game. I don't think Courser Crewfix is really helpful in either scenario.
We'll play it. Another Courser on top. Yeah, I do agree. I think I would have liked the kill spell here. He's far enough ahead that we've switched from defense to offense. Because the things you need to play defense against, you mentioned the draws that punk him out of the game, those still exist is the problem.
Yeah. I think Matt still needs to go on the offensive here to some degree. Now it's gotten really tricky because Matt knows about Ajani's Presence. Joe has 4 mana available, so he can cast it and Strive. And that means that Matt can't even send in the Siege Runner right now because Joe can fend that off so easily. Matt's in a position now where he can only attack with the Fleecemane Lion. This could potentially take 2 or 3 turns to get the job done, and that's a lot of draw steps for Joe.
So Joe's going to Strive it anyway. What Matt was hoping to do is set up a hit with Fleecemane Lion, and then next turn, I think, swinging out the team.
Yeah.
So Joe's going to go ahead and use this to just create a good blocker and scry one. Yeah, I agree. The Courser of Crewfix really, that wasn't the card you wanted to Den Protect back.
Yeah, I like just getting the Obzon Charm back there.
You'd kill something here, then.
If it's not the best card in the abstract, which it still may be, it's the best card against the card that you know is in Joe's hand.
Right. If you made that a same attack here with the Obzon Charm in hand, then you'd get one of the creatures. See what Matt, however, did get a draw for the turn. It is another Courser.
Now, this is kind of the odd spot where Matt might just be going wide.
Yeah. Secret of the Way was the draw for Lossett. At this point, if you look at the clock, Joe definitely playing for the draw here if he gets this game. I don't think he'll get game 3. You look at Urborg, Matt may just want to gain 3 life. Yeah, he's going to play Courser number 3 before dropping that.
I mean, he got a Courser back with a Den Protector. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, this is what you wanted to do, yeah. Here's Courser number 3. Here's land gain 3. Matt's up to 9. That's fairly unreasonable when all your lands start gaining 3. And the life gain from the coursers should, in theory, stop some of Joe's combo draws.
This is still
it's still not 0% though.
Ordeal of Thassa and Treasure Cruise. So you are never completely out of the woods.
Joe, it looks like Matt is going to swing a Lion, a Den Protector, a Courser, and perhaps the Rhino. Yeah, Rhino's coming in as well. And with Siege Rhino, another Siege Rhino revealed on top of Matt's deck, this is a really difficult block for Joe.
Yeah. I mean, he has to, he's likely looking at chump blocking this turn. I mean,
even chump blocking is real close to dead.
Yeah. I don't think Joe has a spell in hand. He scryed Ajani's Presence to the bottom last turn. I believe, correctly thinking that it has to be Treasure Cruise or bust.
Like I need Treasure Cruise, cards. Defiant Strikes, A God's Willing.
Yeah.
All these things. I need to chain some cards.
Right. And instead he found Secret of the Way, and that's not going to offer a lot of defense this turn, and likely is going to be part of some big chump block from Joe this turn. I mean, Joe just trying to figure out, is there some way for me to have a creature in play and survive this turn? Because then you still have hope. You still have Treasure Cruise. You know, Matt's only got green creatures back on defense. So God's Willing's live. Aqueous Form is in your deck. That's live too. But I don't know if there is a way here for Joe to block, not die, and keep something in play.
Yeah, if Rhino wasn't the top card, and Joe, then Joe could make a little more of an aggressive block. Well, he wouldn't have to throw everything away.
I don't know if that's true because, the first block that Joe went to was Hoplite in front of Courser and everything in front of Siege Rhino. That's the best way for him to save damage and leave something left over for him to have to attack with next turn. And that left Joe at exactly lethal because the Fleece Main Lion's 4 and then the Protector's 3 and Joe's at 7. So if Joe doesn't have a block that allows him to survive,
he could let Rhino and Courser through, chump Den Protector and Lion, go to 1 and leave 1 creature back. And then hope to just chain everything onto the 1 guy.
All right, so Joe found his block. He still got his Hoplite. Again, Treasure Cruise, God's Willing's an eligible way for him to punch through. There are a sequence of draws here that Joe can cobble together to get out of this thing.
He stayed alive, and he got the 1 card creature. There was the one he wanted, did not hit the draw. So Matt, Osborne, Koch, 2-0 is the winner over Joe Lossett.
Yeah, Joe there with some stumbles, did rebound there in game 2 in an impressive way. Fell a little bit short, but game 1 there, I think Joe let that one get away in a very subtle way. It's hard to know that the 7th land is going to be the thing that allows your Ajani's Presence to be exactly lethal.